Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive.
Mhm.
Today we're going to be looking at something pretty incredible.
Yeah, this is gonna be a good one.
Yeah. So we're going to be focusing on the 2004 tsunami,
Okay.
but specifically looking at it through the lens of some firsthand accounts and stories of what happened during the event,
Right.
and also some of the sort of broader kind of like takeaways about, like the importance of geography, the power of observation,
Yeah.
and just kind of like the really intense sort of human impact of this massive natural disaster.
Yeah, well, I think one thing that's really interesting is how we can kind of use these personal stories, right, as a way to understand the science a little bit better.
Yeah, totally. Like it's one thing to talk about the tectonic plates shifting and the wave formation and all that stuff, but it's like another thing to hear. How did this actually affect people? Like, what were their experiences?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's what we're going to be doing today.
Sounds good.
So the 2004 tsunami, obviously a really significant event, um, and it affected a lot of different places, but we're going to be focusing specifically on the Andaman and Nicobar Islands,
Okay.
which I'll admit I didn't know a ton about before looking at this material.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, they're not exactly a household name.
Right.
Um, but they're this incredible chain of islands kind of nestled between India and Southeast Asia.
And we actually have a really helpful map here
Oh, perfect.
in the material that kind of shows where they are in relation to everything else, and it's like, wow, they're really right in the thick of things.
Yeah, geographically, they're kind of in a precarious position.
Yeah.
You've got the Andamans to the north, and then the Nicobar Islands kind of trailing down to the south.
And the map even points out some specific islands that we're going to be talking about, like Cachal and Nankauri,
Okay.
which, you first look at them with just names on a page, but as you start reading the stories, they become these like really, vivid places.
Yeah, I think, just getting that visual understanding of where these islands are really helps you grasp the scale of what happened.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So let's talk about what happened.
Okay.
So December 26, 2004,
Yeah.
right? This massive earthquake happens beneath the ocean floor,
Right.
and it triggers this series of gigantic
The
waves.
tsunami.
The tsunami, exactly.
Yeah.
And these waves, radiate outwards across the Indian Ocean, and they slam into the shores of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands.
And it's just total devastation, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to even imagine.
Yeah, and these stories that we have really capture that sense of, the suddenness and the chaos of that day.
Yeah, right? Like, just like how quickly everything changed.
Yeah, for example, there's this account from a man named Ignatius.
Okay.
And he describes losing several family members in the chaos. Just in the blink of an eye, they were gone.
Wow, that's just heartbreaking, like the sheer force of nature.
It really shows you just how devastating this event was on a personal level.
And then there's the story of Sanjeev,
Oh.
who was a policeman,
Okay.
and he managed to save his family.
Okay.
But then he went back out to try and rescue others,
Mm-hmm.
and he ended up losing his own life.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
I know, right?
Like, incredibly heroic.
Yeah, just a true act of selflessness.
Yeah.
Um, and it's like in the midst of all this, tragedy and chaos, you see these moments of like, incredible courage and compassion.
Exactly.
Like, for instance, there's this other story about this 13-year-old girl named Meghna,
Okay.
and she survived by clinging to a door for 2 whole days.
What, 2 days?
Yeah, no, it's crazy, right?
Wow.
Just incredible resilience, like the will to survive.
You'd have to be so strong.
I can't even imagine.
I mean, just the mental and physical strength
Yeah.
to endure something like that.
And then there's this other story about a young girl named Almas Javed,
Okay.
and she actually witnessed her entire family being swept away by the wave.
Oh, my God.
I know. And it's like her story is a reminder that, the impact of this event goes beyond just the immediate physical devastation.
Right.
It's like the psychological trauma, the scars that stay with people long after the waves have receded.
It's like the invisible wounds
Yeah,
that
exactly.
people carry with them.
And it's interesting, as we're talking about these stories, I'm also reminded of this question that keeps coming up about animals and the tsunami.
Oh, yeah. What about that?
Like, there are all these accounts of animals seemingly sensing the danger before humans did.
Right. Like they knew something was wrong.
Yeah, and they like escaped to higher ground, or they just behaved really strangely before the waves hit.
It's like they have some kind of sixth sense.
Right, and it makes you wonder, like, do animals have some kind of intuition that we don't?
Yeah. It's a pretty fascinating question.
It is, and we're going to explore that a bit more later on.
Okay, cool.
But first I want to talk about one of the most incredible stories of survival from this whole event.
Okay, let's hear it.
And this one takes us to Thailand,
Right?
where a young girl named Tilly Smith, well, she ended up saving lives because of something she learned in school.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So Tilly was on vacation with her family in Phuket,
Uh-huh.
and they're on the beach, right? Just enjoying their holiday.
Yeah, sounds idyllic.
Right. And suddenly, Tilly starts noticing that the sea is behaving really strangely.
Okay, in what way?
Well, for one thing, the water starts receding really rapidly, like
Yeah.
way further out than normal.
Oh, that's not good.
Yeah, and then she sees these like unusual whirlpools forming, and the water starts bubbling and foaming.
Huh.
And she's like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
I've seen this before
Okay, where?
in her geography class.
Oh, wow, no way.
Yeah.
She connected it back to that.
She did. She had just learned about tsunamis in school.
Wow, what a moment.
I know, right? It's like a real life aha
Yeah.
moment.
Totally.
So she turns to her parents and she's like, tsunami, we need to get out of here.
Can you imagine being her parents?
I know, right? Like a 10-year-old girl telling you that a tsunami is about to hit.
Yeah, I'd be like, okay, honey, whatever you say.
Right.
But like not really believing it, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Like at first they're hesitant to believe her,
Huh?
but Tilly is adamant. Like she knows what she's seeing.
Wow.
And thankfully her parents decide to trust her knowledge.
Good thing they did.
Yeah. They immediately started loading other people on the beach,
Okay.
and they all ran for higher ground.
Because of that.
They escaped the tsunami.
Wow, that's incredible.
It is, right? It's like a testament to the power of education.
Yeah, it's not just about passing exams. It's about like literally saving lives.
Right. And it just shows you that you never know when something you've learned might come in handy.
Yeah, you never.
Like knowledge is power.
It really is.
And in this case, it was life-saving power.
Absolutely. So now I'm really curious about this whole animal thing.
Okay, let's get back to that.
Yeah, let's dive into that.
So this question of whether animals can sense tsunamis, it's really intriguing.
It is.
And there's actually quite a bit of evidence to suggest that they might be able to.
Okay, like what?
Well, there are reports from all over the affected regions, Sri Lanka, India, Thailand,
Uh-huh.
of animals behaving strangely before the waves hit.
Like specific example?
Yeah, so for instance, in Sri Lanka, there were these elephants.
Yeah, see?
They were seen heading for higher ground like hours before the tsunami struck.
Oh, wow.
And then there were reports of dogs refusing to go outside.
Really?
Yeah, and even zoo animals, like behaving erratically, like pacing and roaring and just acting really agitated.
That's so interesting.
And then there's the fact that relatively few animal carcasses were found
Oh, right.
in the affected areas.
Compared to the human death toll.
Exactly.
Wow. So what's the explanation for that?
Well, there are a couple of theories.
Okay.
One is that animals have some kind of sixth sense, right?
Uh-huh. Like an intuition?
Yeah, some kind of instinct that allows them to sense danger that we humans just aren't aware of.
Okay, I can see that.
But then there's another explanation that's a little more grounded in science.
Okay, what's that?
And that has to do with animals' heightened senses.
Okay.
So, for example, some animals, like elephants, they're incredibly sensitive to vibrations in the ground.
Yeah.
And it's possible that they could sense the earthquake that triggered the tsunami long before we could.
Oh, that makes sense.
And then some marine animals,
Yeah.
they can detect changes in water pressure.
Okay.
So they might have sensed the tsunami waves building up far out at sea.
Interesting.
So it could be that it's not so much a sixth sense,
Okay.
but just that they're picking up on these subtle cues in the environment that we're not equipped to detect.
Right, like their senses are just way more attuned to
Exactly.
those kinds of changes.
But which explanation do you find more convincing?
That's a tough one.
I know, right? It's a real mystery.
Yeah, it is. But either way, it's pretty amazing.
It is, and it just goes to show that there's still so much we don't know about the natural world and how animals experience it.
Yeah.
Now, the material that we're looking at here, it doesn't just tell these stories.
Okay.
It also includes some really interesting exercises and activities.
Oh, cool. Like what kind?
Well, one of them focuses on movement.
Movement.
Yeah. And how the words we use can actually depict the power of the tsunami.
I'm not sure I follow.
Okay, so it asks you to identify words from the tsunami accounts
Uh-huh.
that describe different types of movement,
Okay.
like words like swept away or rushed or clinging or engulfed.
Oh, I see.
And then it asks you to categorize these words as representing like fast movement, slow movement, or neither slow nor fast.
Interesting. So it's like analyzing the language.
Exactly.
See how it reflects the event.
Yeah, and it's really fascinating because when you actually do this exercise,
Yeah.
you realize that most of the words fall into the fast movement category.
Oh, that makes sense.
Right.
Given the nature of a tsunami.
Exactly. It's like the language itself is mirroring the speed and the force of the tsunami.
Yeah, that's really cool.
It is, right? It's like you can almost feel the power of the event just through the words that are being used.
Just through the words.
Yeah, and then there's another exercise that focuses on word formation.
Okay.
So like taking a base word, like tremble,
Okay, tremble.
and then creating different forms of it,
Okay.
like tremor or trembling.
Got it.
And it's a really fun way to kind of expand your vocabulary.
Yeah.
But it also highlights how, dynamic language is
Right.
and how we can use words to paint this really vivid picture of what happened.
I like that.
Yeah. And then there's one more exercise that I thought was really insightful.
Okay.
And this one asks you to identify the active and passive voice
Okay.
in sentences taken from the tsunami accounts.
Interesting.
Yeah. And at first I was like, oh, grammar.
Right.
But then as I started doing the exercise, I realized that it's actually about so much more than just grammar.
Oh, okay.
Well, it's about recognizing how the choice of active or passive voice can actually shift the focus of a sentence and impact how we perceive the information.
Give me an example.
Okay, so for example, take the sentence, Meghna was swept away,
Okay.
versus the wave swept Meghna away.
Okay, I see the difference.
Right, so in the first sentence, the focus is on Meghna, the person who experienced the action,
Yeah.
and it kind of highlights her vulnerability in the face of this like immense force.
Okay.
But then the second sentence, the wave swept Meghna away.
Yeah.
It emphasizes the power of the wave itself.
It shifts the focus
Exactly.
to the force of nature.
And it's like this subtle shift,
Yeah.
but it really changes how you understand what happened.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Right. So it's not just about grammar rules.
Okay.
It's about understanding how language can shape our perception of events.
It's like a lesson in media literacy almost.
Totally. Yeah, like how even factual accounts can be presented in ways that emphasize different aspects of a story.
Right. It's all about perspective.
Exactly.
That's really fascinating.
And it's something to be aware of,
Yeah.
whenever we're reading or listening to anything, really.
For sure.
But especially when we're trying to understand something as complex and as powerful as a natural disaster.
Absolutely. I mean, these exercises really make you think
They do, right?
about the language we use.
Yeah, and how we make sense of these events.
Exactly.
And I think that's a perfect segue into the next part of our deep dive,
Okay, what's that?
where we're going to explore some even deeper questions
All right, I'm ready.
about the 2004 tsunami and its impact on the world.
Let's do it. All right, I'm ready.
Okay, so we've talked about the science of tsunamis,
Uh-huh.
and we've heard these incredible stories of survival.
Yeah.
But there's another aspect of this whole event that I think is really important to explore,
Okay, what's that?
and that's the human impact,
Yeah, like the long-term effects.
right? Like, how did this event change people's lives, not just in the immediate aftermath, but in the years that followed?
Yeah, that's a really important question.
It is, and it's something that the material we're looking at really delves into.
Okay.
So one of the things that I found really striking
Uh,
was the sense of loss and grief.
right, like so many people lost loved ones.
Yeah, and it's not just the physical loss.
Right?
It's also the loss of community, the loss of homes,
Yeah.
the loss of livelihoods.
It's like their whole world was turned upside down.
Exactly, and it's like this kind of collective trauma
Right.
that can be really hard to process.
Yeah, and I imagine it's something that people are still dealing with today.
Absolutely, and then on top of the grief,
Yeah.
there's also this incredible resilience.
Right, like people had to rebuild their lives.
Yeah, and they did, and they continue to do so.
It's amazing how people can find the strength to carry on.
It is, and it's a testament to the human spirit, you know?
Yeah.
Like, even in the face of unimaginable tragedy, there's this incredible capacity for hope and healing.
And I think those stories of resilience are just as important to tell as the stories of loss.
Yeah, I agree completely. Like, it's about finding that balance
Uh-huh.
between acknowledging the devastation,
Yeah.
but also recognizing the strength, the courage of the people who lived through it.
And I think that's something that the material we're looking at does really well.
Yeah, it does. It kind of weaves those two things together,
Yeah.
the darkness and the light.
Yeah.
And it creates this really powerful and moving narrative.
And I think it's important for us to remember that, these events,
Yeah.
They're not just something that happened in the past. They
Right.
continue to shape the present.
And they have lessons for the future.
Exactly. Like, what can we learn from this?
Yeah, what can we learn from the 2004 tsunami?
To help us be better prepared for future disasters.
And to better support those who are affected by them.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest lessons is the importance of early warning systems.
Right. Like, if people had known that the tsunami was coming,
Yeah.
many more lives could have been saved.
And it's not just about having the technology in place. It's
Okay.
also about making sure that people know what to do.
Right, like having evacuation plans.
Yeah, and educating people about the warning signs.
Yeah, so that they can take action.
Exactly. And then there's also the importance of community.
Yeah, like how people came together to help each other.
Right. In the aftermath of the disaster.
Like, in times of crisis, you really see the best of humanity.
Yeah. And I think that's something that we can all learn from.
Absolutely, like the importance of supporting each other.
Yeah.
And building strong communities.
Because you never know when you might need to rely on that support.
So true, so true. And I think another important lesson
Yeah.
is the power of knowledge.
Right. Like we talked about Tilly Smith.
Yeah, the girl who saved lives because she knew about tsunamis.
Exactly. And it just shows you that, education is not just about getting good grades. Right. It's about equipping ourselves with the tools to understand the world around us.
And to make informed decisions.
Yeah. And sometimes those decisions can be life-saving.
And then, of course, there's the question of animals.
Oh, yeah. That whole sixth sense thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, do they really have some kind of intuition that allows them to sense danger? It's still a mystery.
It is, but it's a fascinating one.
Yeah, and I think it raises some really interesting questions about our relationship with the natural world.
Like, are we really as in tune with our surroundings as we think we are?
Yeah, and what can we learn from animals?
About how to better protect ourselves from natural disasters.
I don't know, but it's something to think about.
It is, and I think it's a reminder that there's still so much we don't know
Yeah,
about the world and how everything is interconnected.
absolutely. And I think that's a good place to wrap up this part of our deep dive.
Yeah, I agree. We've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
From the science of tsunamis to the human impact to the lessons we can learn for the future. It's been a really thought-provoking conversation.
It has, and I think it's one that we could continue for hours.
Yeah, there's so much more to explore.
But we'll have to save that for another time.
Okay, sounds good.
So for now, let's take a quick break.
Wait.
And when we come back, we'll delve into some specific examples
Okay.
of how people are rebuilding their lives in the aftermath of the tsunami.
Looking forward to it. Looking forward to it.
Okay, so as we kind of wrap up our deep dive into the 2004 tsunami, I want to touch on something that we kind of alluded to earlier.
Okay, what's that?
It's this idea of, how do we process these kinds of events?
Right, like how do we make sense of something so massive and so devastating?
Exactly. And the material we're looking at, it actually includes some really interesting exercises
Oh, cool.
that kind of encourage us to think about this in different ways.
Okay, like what?
So one of the exercises,
Uh-huh.
it asks you to put yourself in the shoes of a volunteer
Okay.
who went to the Andaman and Nicobar Islands after the tsunami. And it's like, imagine being there, in the relief camps, distributing aid, hearing firsthand accounts
Yeah.
of what people went through.
Yeah, that would be incredibly powerful.
It would, right? And it's like, it kind of forces you to confront the reality of the situation.
Right, like it's not just an abstract event anymore.
Exactly. It's like, these are real people, real lives that have been irrevocably changed.
And I think that's something that's easy to forget.
Yeah, when you're just reading about it in a book or seeing it on the news.
We can feel distant.
Right.
Right.
But this exercise, it kind of brings it home.
Makes it personal.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's another exercise
Okay.
that asks you to reflect on your own life
Uh-huh.
and to think about a time when something you learned in a classroom unexpectedly helped you in a real life situation.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and it could be anything, like a math formula or a historical fact or a scientific concept, anything that, at the time you were like, why am I learning this?
Well, when am I ever going to use this?
Exactly.
Yeah,
But then suddenly it becomes relevant.
like it clicks.
And it's like, wow, knowledge is power.
Yeah, and you never know when it might come in handy.
That's so true. And it kind of makes me think about the story of Tilly Smith.
Oh, yeah, the girl who saved lives because she knew about tsunamis.
Right. And it's like, she's a perfect example of this,
Yeah.
Like she was just a kid in a classroom
Yeah.
learning about this seemingly abstract phenomenon.
Right.
And then, bam, it becomes this life-saving knowledge.
And it makes you wonder, like, what other knowledge are we carrying around that can be
Yeah.
useful in unexpected ways?
That's a really good point. And it kind of highlights the importance of being open to learning new things.
Yeah.
And not dismissing things as irrelevant.
Right, because you never know.
Exactly. And I think that's a really good message to end on.
Yeah.
As we wrap up this deep dive into the 2004 tsunami,
Mm-hmm.
it's been a really powerful journey.
It has.
We've explored the science, the stories, the
It's just
impact,
the lesson.
the lessons.
Yeah.
And I think we've all learned a lot.
I know I have.
Yeah, me too. And I hope our listeners have as well.
Yeah. Thanks for taking us on this deep dive.
Of course, my pleasure. And thanks to everyone out there for listening.
Yeah, we'll see you next time.
For another fascinating exploration.
Of knowledge and ideas.
Until then, keep learning, keep exploring, and most importantly, keep asking questions.
Absolutely.